I always thought my life was ordinary in the best possible way. I was 46 years old, married to my high school sweetheart for more than 2 decades, and raising a son who made me proud every single day. When people asked me how I was doing, I usually answered with a smile, "Can't complain." And I meant it. We had a modest house in the suburbs of Indiana, the kind with a trimmed lawn, a basketball hoop in the driveway, and an American flag swaying from the porch. To outsiders, it looked like the perfect slice of the American dream. And for the longest time, I believed it really was. My wife, Laura, was the kind of woman everyone seemed to admire. She wasn't flashy or loud, but she had that quiet charisma that drew people in. At church, she was always the one organizing bake sales or volunteering for Sunday school. At neighborhood block parties, she floated between conversations, laughing easily, never without a glass of sweet tea in her hand. If she wasn't running errands or cooking dinner, she was at the gym. Fitness had become her passion in recent years, and she looked younger than her age, toned and glowing in a way that often made other women whisper. And then there was our son, Evan, 19 years old, a sophomore in college, studying engineering at Purdue. He was the kind of kid you'd want as your son, disciplined, smart, respectful, with a goofy sense of humor that kept our dinner table lively. He was the center of our world, and I'll admit I often measured my success as a husband and father by looking at him. If Evan turned out right, then maybe I hadn't completely failed at this life. That was the picture we painted to the world, a tight-knit family, bound by love, faith, and tradition. But if you've lived long enough, you know this truth: the more perfect something looks, the more cracks it hides beneath the surface. And though I didn't know it at the time, the life I thought was solid and steady was about to unravel in ways I couldn't imagine. It started small. They always say betrayal never comes like an explosion. It creeps in like a draft under a closed door. Subtle, barely noticeable at first. Laura's habits began to shift. She'd always been diligent about keeping a schedule, but lately her gym sessions started running longer. She said the classes were more intense now, or that she'd started staying late to chat with new friends. Sometimes she came home flushed, hair damp, a little too giddy. "Good workout?" I'd ask, not thinking too much of it. "The best," she'd reply, dropping her gym bag in the corner, kissing me on the cheek, and heading straight for the shower. No big deal, I told myself. Everyone needs hobbies. Everyone deserves me time. After 23 years of marriage, you stop sweating the small stuff. But it wasn't just the gym. She started buying new clothes. Nothing extravagant, but tighter, trendier. She downloaded Snapchat, which made me raise an eyebrow. Who in their 40s uses Snapchat? Evan teased her about it, saying she was trying too hard to stay young. Laura just laughed it off, but I noticed she was glued to her phone more than ever. Little notifications would light up the screen, and she'd tilt it away from me like it was some private joke. I brushed it off. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who suspects every smile or secret text. We'd been through so much together, paying off the mortgage, losing parents, watching our son grow. Infidelity was something that happened to other people in other families, not ours. Still, something in my gut stirred uneasily. There's this memory I can't shake. A Saturday in late September. Evan was home from college for the weekend, and we decided to have a backyard BBQ. The kind of afternoon that's supposed to remind you what family is all about. I was at the grill flipping burgers while Laura and Evan tossed a football back and forth. The sun was setting, the smell of charcoal mixed with fresh-cut grass. And for a moment I thought, this is it. This is happiness. Then Laura's phone buzzed on the patio table. She glanced at it mid-throw, froze for a fraction of a second, then quickly set it face down. I remember the look in her eyes, guilt or maybe fear. It was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by her easy laugh as she caught the ball and tossed it back to Evan. But that brief flicker planted something in me. Doubt. And once doubt takes root in a marriage, it grows fast. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling while Laura scrolled on her phone beside me. Her screen glowed faintly in the dark, lighting her face in shifting colors. I turned toward her, pretending to shift in my sleep, and noticed her smile. A private smile, the kind she used to give me when we were young and reckless, and couldn't keep our hands off each other. But this smile wasn't for me. "Who are you talking to?" I asked casually, breaking the silence. She jumped slightly, locking her phone. "Just a friend from the gym." "You don't know her." "Her." She said, "her." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. So I said nothing. Rolled over, pretended sleep came easy. But deep down, I knew something was shifting. Something ugly. Something sharp. The weeks that followed were filled with more of those subtle moments. Late nights, excuses about running errands, more makeup than usual, a new perfume, sweet, heavy, unfamiliar. One evening, Evan called me from campus. We talked about his classes, football games, the stress of exams. Then he asked, "Dad, is Mom okay? She seems different." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Just distracted, I guess. Like she's hiding something." I brushed it off with the best lie I could muster. "She's just busy. You know how your mom is?" But my son had seen it too. That scared me more than anything. The first real crack came on a Tuesday night. I remember because Tuesday was usually taco night in our house, a silly tradition we started when Evan was in middle school. Laura used to make a big deal out of it. Guacamole from scratch, margaritas for us. Endless toppings spread across the counter. But that Tuesday, she called me around 5 to say she'd be late. "Work ran over," she said. "Don't wait up. Just throw something together for yourself." I sat at the table alone that night, eating a limp microwave burrito, staring at the empty chair across from me. 23 years of marriage, and suddenly Tuesday taco night wasn't sacred anymore. When she finally came home, it was after 9. Her hair was tousled, her cheeks flushed. She smelled faintly of sweat and some cheap cologne I didn't recognize. I asked her about work. She gave me a vague answer about helping a coworker with a project. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. That's when the paranoia began to creep in for real. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. The mileage on her car, a smudge of lipstick she never wore around me, the way she always seemed eager to shower the moment she got home. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was projecting, overthinking, turning molehills into mountains. But the harder I tried to silence the voice in my head, the louder it screamed. One night, curiosity got the better of me. She'd left her phone charging in the kitchen while she took a shower. I stood there staring at it, my heart pounding like I was about to commit a crime. My hand shook as I picked it up. The screen was locked, of course, but one notification lingered, a Snapchat message. The username wasn't one I recognized, just some random handle with numbers. When she came back downstairs, hair wet and smelling of that same perfume, the phone was still in my hand. She froze. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I was just moving it," I stammered. She snatched it from me like it was a lifeline. "Don't go through my things." Her reaction stung more than anything, like she had something to protect, like she was guarding a secret. That night I barely slept. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe beside me, wondering if I was sharing a bed with a stranger. Every memory of us together played in my mind like a cruel slideshow. Our wedding day, Evan's birth, late-night drives with the windows down, laughing until our stomachs hurt. Were all those moments real? Or had I been fooling myself all along? By morning, exhaustion had hardened into determination. I needed answers. I started small. driving by the gym to see if her car was there when she said it would be, checking receipts she tossed in the trash. She wasn't sloppy, but she wasn't careful either. That's how betrayal works. It thrives in routine. One Thursday evening, she said she was meeting a friend for coffee after the gym. Something told me to follow her. I waited 10 minutes, then got in my truck and drove. My heart hammered the whole way, sweat slicking my palms. I felt like a stalker, like some desperate fool in a bad movie. But what I saw confirmed everything I'd been afraid of. She wasn't at Starbucks. She was at a diner on the edge of town, sitting across from a man. At first, I thought maybe it was just a friend. But then I saw the way she leaned forward, her smile brighter than it had been for me in years. I saw the way his hand brushed hers across the table. And most of all, I saw him. He was young, too young, barely more than a boy. And then it hit me like a freight train. He looked younger than our own son. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. A hot, sour wave of rage washed over me, followed by humiliation so sharp it felt like I'd been gutted. 23 years of marriage, and she was sneaking around with someone who could have been Evan's classmate. I sat there for nearly an hour, watching them laugh, sip coffee, share something I wasn't allowed to see. Every fiber of my being wanted to storm inside, flip the table, drag her home. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I drove away with my stomach churning, my world tilted off its axis. That night, when she came home, she kissed me on the cheek, like nothing had happened. She smelled faintly of coffee, her hair a little mussed. She looked me in the eye and lied without flinching. And I realized something. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I built a life with, was gone. Replaced by someone who could look me in the eye and betray me without a flicker of guilt. The days that followed were a blur. I went to work, paid bills, mowed the lawn, going through the motions like a man in a trance. But inside, I was unraveling. My mind replayed that diner scene over and over, each time twisting the knife deeper. At dinner, I studied her every move. The way she set her fork down, the way she scrolled her phone under the table, the way she avoided my gaze. Evan noticed too. "You guys okay?" he asked one evening. "Of course," Laura said quickly, smiling too brightly. "Why wouldn't we be?" But I could see it in my son's eyes. He knew something was off. And so the perfect family illusion, our little suburban dream, began to crack wide open. Looking back now, I realized that was only the beginning. I thought the worst pain came from suspecting, from catching glimpses of the truth. But I was wrong. The worst was still to come, because betrayal doesn't just destroy trust. It destroys the story you've told yourself about your life. And when I finally uncovered the full extent of Laura's affair, I would wish I'd never looked at all. After that night at the diner, something inside me changed. It wasn't just doubt anymore. It was certainty. Certainty that the woman I'd built my life with was lying to me. Certainty that the family I thought was untouchable was in danger of crumbling. But what do you do when you have proof in your gut, but not in your hands? Confront her? Risk being gaslit into oblivion? Or wait, gather evidence, and let the truth build into something undeniable? I chose the latter. For the next few weeks, I became a man possessed. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Not Evan, not my closest friend at work, not even my pastor. I bottled it up, carrying the weight like a stone in my chest, and turned my focus to watching, observing, collecting. It started with her schedule. Laura had always been predictable. Morning runs, grocery shopping on Saturdays, yoga on Wednesdays. But lately, her calendar was a mess. She claimed to have errands that lasted hours, gym sessions that stretched into the evening, church committee meetings that, as far as I could tell, didn't exist. I began writing things down. Times, dates, excuses. A ledger of betrayal, each entry another nail in the coffin of our marriage. One night I followed her again. She told me she was meeting a girlfriend for dinner. I gave her a 20-minute head start, then got in my truck. My stomach churned as I tailed her, headlights off, staying 2 cars back like some rookie private eye. She didn't go to the restaurant she mentioned. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of a budget motel on the outskirts of town. My chest tightened as I watched her step out of the car, hair freshly done, makeup flawless. She looked giddy, like a teenager sneaking out for a forbidden date. Minutes later, another car pulled up, and there he was, the same young man from the diner. Baseball cap turned backward, hoodie, jeans, barely old enough to rent a car, let alone share a bed with a married woman. They disappeared into a room together, the door clicking shut behind them. I sat there for what felt like hours, gripping the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap. Rage burned through me, but underneath it was something worse: humiliation. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was cheating with someone young enough to be mistaken for our son's friend. And the cruelest part? Our son was the same age. I drove home that night in silence, my hands trembling, my mind blank. When Laura returned hours later, she slipped into bed beside me, smelling faintly of cheap cologne and motel soap. She curled against me like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just destroyed everything we'd built. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was war. But war requires strategy, and strategy requires patience. So I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started digging deeper. I checked our bank accounts, scanning for charges she couldn't explain. I sifted through trash for receipts, scraps of paper, anything. I even looked at her car, and sure enough, found a motel receipt crumpled under the passenger seat. Room 208, paid in cash. My heart sank as I held that slip of paper. Proof. Undeniable. And yet I still didn't know how to use it. The hardest part wasn't the spying or the secrecy, it was pretending. Pretending everything was fine. Pretending I didn't know. Sitting across from her at dinner, making small talk, while images of her with that boy flashed through my mind. Going to church on Sundays, shaking hands with neighbors, smiling like a man who wasn't living a lie. Evan came home one weekend and noticed immediately. "Dad, what's going on? You look, I don't know, worn out." I forced a smile. "Just work stress, son. Don't worry about it." But he didn't buy it. He watched me closely that whole weekend, like he could sense something rotten beneath the surface. And maybe he could. Because kids always know, even when you try to shield them. The breaking point came one Friday night. Laura said she was going to a late yoga class. I sat on the couch, staring at the clock, my chest tight with dread. Around 9, I grabbed my keys and drove to the gym. The parking lot was empty. No yoga class, no Laura. That was when the last thread of denial snapped. I sat in my truck for nearly an hour, debating whether to track her down, whether to barge into that motel room and drag her out by the arm. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the realization that once I confronted her, there'd be no going back. So instead, I went home, sat at the kitchen table in the dark, waited. When she finally walked through the door past midnight, her hair messy, her smile smug, I almost laughed. She didn't even try to come up with a good excuse this time, just mumbled something about traffic and headed upstairs. I stayed at the table, staring into the shadows, feeling something inside me harden into stone. Because betrayal isn't just about cheating. It's about the lies, the disrespect, the sheer audacity of thinking you'll never get caught. And my wife, my Laura, had crossed that line. The next morning, Laura was humming in the kitchen while making coffee, as if nothing had happened. The sound made my skin crawl. How could she be so calm, so normal, when I knew the truth? She slid a mug toward me with that same smile she'd worn for years, the one that used to make me feel loved. Now it felt like a mask. I wanted to smash the cup against the wall. Instead, I took it, nodded, and said nothing. Because I wasn't ready to reveal my hand. Not yet. That weekend, Evan came home again. I could tell he was carrying some unspoken worry, but he didn't press. Instead, he tried to lighten the mood. "Hey, Dad, let's grill tonight, like old times." So we did. I stood at the grill, smoke rising into the autumn air, while Evan tossed a football in the yard. Laura came outside in a sundress, holding a glass of wine, smiling like the picture-perfect wife. To anyone else, we looked like the American dream, a family intact, a family whole. But to me, the illusion was already shattered, because every time I looked at her, I didn't see my wife. I saw her slipping into a motel room with someone half her age. I saw her betraying not just me, but our son, our family, our entire life. Later that night, after Evan went to bed, I sat in the living room with Laura. The TV played some forgettable sitcom, laugh tracks echoing into the silence between us. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Laura," I said, my voice tight, "where were you Friday night?" She blinked, feigning confusion. "Friday? I told you. Yoga." "There was no yoga class," I said evenly. "I checked." For a split second, her face faltered. Then she laughed, shaking her head. "You're being paranoid." "What? Did you actually drive there? God, you sound crazy." Gaslighting. Classic. I clenched my fists but kept my tone calm. "I just want the truth." "You already have it," she snapped, her eyes flashing. "You're imagining things, John. You're insecure. Maybe you're the one with a guilty conscience." The words hit me like a slap. She was turning it on me, twisting my sanity, making me doubt myself. And I realized then, this wasn't just infidelity. This was psychological warfare. I didn't push further that night. What would be the point? She was dug in, ready to lie, ready to fight. And I knew if I wanted the truth to surface, I'd need more than accusations. I'd need undeniable proof. So I made a decision. I hired a private investigator. It felt surreal, sitting in a dingy office with a man named Don, who looked like he'd stepped out of a noir film. Rumpled suit, nicotine-stained fingers, eyes that had seen too much. I slid a photo of Laura across the desk, my hands trembling. "She's my wife," I said quietly. "I think she's cheating." He studied the picture, then looked at me. "How long you been married?" 23 years. He let out a low whistle. "That's a long time to throw away." "Don't worry. If she's doing what you think she's doing, I'll find out." I left his office with my stomach in knots. Part of me hoped he'd come back with nothing, that I was wrong, that I was the paranoid fool she said I was. But another part of me, deep down, already knew what he'd find. The following week was torture. Every time Laura left the house, I wondered if Don was tailing her, snapping photos, gathering evidence. Every time she smiled at me, I wondered if he was texting her at that very moment. And then, one Thursday, Don called. "You were right," he said simply. My throat tightened. "Show me." When I met him, he handed me a manila envelope. Inside were photos, grainy, black and white, but damning. Laura and the boy, walking hand in hand out of the motel. Laura kissing him in the parking lot. Laura looking happier than I'd seen her in years. I stared at the photos until my vision blurred. Rage, humiliation, heartbreak, all of it swirled inside me until I felt like I might explode. "She's been seeing him at least twice a week," Don said, his tone matter-of-fact. Always the same motel. Same pattern. Sorry, man. I nodded numbly, unable to speak. That night, Laura came home late again. She slipped into bed beside me, humming under her breath, scrolling on her phone. And I lay there, wide awake, those photos burned into my mind. She wasn't just betraying me. She was betraying our son, our family, our vows. And the cruelest twist of all? The man she risked everything for was younger than our boy. By the end of that week, I wasn't just a husband living with betrayal. I was a man planning his next move. Because once you know the truth, once the illusion is gone, there are only two choices left: collapse under the weight of it or rise up and fight. And I wasn't going to collapse. Not yet. When you've lived with someone for more than 2 decades, you think you know every version of them. The way they laugh, the way they cry, the way they squeeze your hand in church when the pastor says something that hits home. But nothing prepares you for the version that betrays you. After dawn, the investigator handed me those photos. It was like I was living in 2 realities. In one, I was still the husband, the father, the suburban man grilling burgers in the backyard. In the other, I was the fool, sharing a bed with a woman who kissed a boy in motel parking lots. The split tore at me. Laura didn't know I had proof yet. She still came home humming, still scrolled her phone with that private smile, still looked me in the eye and lied without blinking. And in some sick way, she looked happier than she had in years. Like the weight of being a mother and wife had been lifted, replaced by some toxic thrill. That's what made it sting the most. Not just that she cheated, but that she looked alive while doing it. I started watching her differently. Every gesture, every word became a clue in this twisted puzzle. When she put on perfume, was it for me or for him? When she laughed at the dinner table, was she remembering some joke the boy had told her hours earlier? Even Evan noticed. "Mom, what's with the new phone case?" he asked one evening during dinner. She blushed. "Oh, just thought I'd try something new." It was bright, glittery, something a teenager might pick out. Evan raised an eyebrow but didn't press. I caught his eyes, and for a brief moment I saw the flicker of confusion, maybe even suspicion. He was starting to see it too. The more I thought about it, the more the betrayal warped in my head. It wasn't just infidelity. It was humiliation. Because she hadn't chosen some older co-worker, some wealthy stranger. No, she'd chosen someone barely a man, someone younger than our own son. It was like she wanted to erase the life we'd built, to regress into some fantasy where she was still 20 and desirable, but in chasing that fantasy, she turned our marriage into a joke. And me? I was the punchline. I couldn't keep the secret bottled forever. One night, I pulled Don's envelope back out from the drawer where I'd hidden it. I laid the photos on the table, staring at them under the dim kitchen light. Laura in her sundress, holding hands with the boy. Laura leaning across the diner table, her eyes lit up like a girl on prom night. Laura kissing him outside the motel, passion written all over her face. I felt sick. That's when Evan walked in. "Dad, what's that?" I scrambled to gather the photos, but it was too late. He'd seen enough. His face twisted in confusion, then horror. "Is that Mom?" I swallowed hard. "Evan?" He grabbed one of the photos before I could stop him. His eyes scanned it, his jaw tightening. "Who the hell is that?" I had no words, just silence. Evan slammed the photo down, his hands shaking. "She's with... He's younger than me." The betrayal wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to him, too. That night was the first time I saw real rage in my son's eyes. He stormed upstairs, slamming his door so hard the frame rattled. Laura came home an hour later, humming like always, only to find both of us sitting in silence, the weight of truth between us. "Everything okay?" she asked lightly, setting her purse down. Neither of us answered. Her smile faltered, but she kept up the act, heading upstairs as if nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. I wish I could say I confronted her right then. I didn't. Maybe I was still too stunned, too broken. Maybe I wanted her to dig her own grave. So instead, I let the silence grow. The air in our house became poisonous, thick with tension, sharp with unspoken words. Evan barely looked at his mother. At meals, he kept his head down, stabbing his food like it had wronged him. Laura noticed, of course, but she chalked it up to teenage mood swings. She had no idea he knew. And she had no idea that soon the truth would rip everything apart. The silence in our home was unbearable. Evan barely spoke to his mother, and I avoided her as much as I could. It felt like living with a stranger. No, worse than that. A stranger you once loved, trusted, built your life around. A stranger who was now your enemy, but still wore your wife's face. Laura, for her part, pretended not to notice. She hummed while cooking, cracked jokes at the dinner table, texted furiously on her phone with that same private smile. She thought she still had the upper hand, that her little secret was safe, but the truth had already poisoned everything. Evan confronted me late one night. I was in the garage, sitting on a folding chair with a beer in my hand, staring at the concrete floor. He came storming in, his face pale with fury. "Dad, why aren't you saying anything?" he demanded. "Why are you just sitting here while she's out there with him?" I rubbed my temples. "Evan, it's not that simple." "The hell it's not." His voice cracked, raw with emotion. "She's cheating on you, on us, with some kid. He looks like he should be in my fraternity, not—" "God, Dad, he's younger than me." His words echoed in the garage, louder than the cicadas buzzing outside. And hearing my son say it out loud, put it in those terms, made the humiliation sink even deeper. "I know," I whispered. "Then why aren't you doing anything?" I looked him in the eye, the weight of fatherhood crushing me. Because once I do, there's no going back. The second I confront her, Evan, our family is gone. He clenched his fists, his jaw trembling. "It's already gone, Dad." And he was right. The next day, Laura invited me to go out to dinner. "Just the two of us," she said with a smile that almost seemed rehearsed. "It's been a while since we had a date night." I stared at her, wondering if she was mocking me. But I agreed, not because I wanted romance, but because I wanted answers. We ended up at an Italian place downtown, the kind of spot we used to visit on anniversaries. She ordered wine, laughed at the waiter's jokes, leaned across the table like we were still newlyweds. And for a fleeting moment I almost forgot. Almost. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her smile faltering for just a second before she flipped it over. That was all it took to remind me. Halfway through dinner, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Who is he?" I asked quietly. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What? Don't play dumb, Laura, I know. I've seen you with him." She set her fork down slowly, her expression shifting into something between anger and panic. "You've been spying on me?" "Don't turn this on me," I snapped. "I know you're seeing someone. I know he's younger than our son." Her eyes widened. For the first time, her mask cracked. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Then make me understand," I shot back. She looked down at her lap, twisting her napkin. "He makes me feel alive again. He looks at me like I'm not just someone's wife or someone's mother. He looks at me like I'm worth something." Her words cut deeper than any knife. "Worth something?" I spat. "So, 23 years, a home, a son, that's nothing." Tears welled in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were real or just another performance. "I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you said," I interrupted. The waiter arrived with our entrees, oblivious to the storm at our table. Neither of us touched the food. That night, I didn't follow her home. I drove in silence, my hands gripping the wheel, my chest burning with betrayal. When we pulled into the driveway, Evan was waiting on the porch. He took one look at our faces and knew. "Did she admit it?" he asked me directly. Laura gasped. "Evan, don't," he snapped, his voice shaking with disgust. "Don't you dare talk to me like you're still my mom." The venom in his voice startled me. He wasn't just hurt. He was broken. "Evan, please," Laura whispered, reaching for him. He pulled back. "You're pathetic. Do you know what it feels like to realize your mom is sleeping with someone my age, younger than me?" Her face crumpled, but Evan didn't relent. "You didn't just betray Dad. You betrayed me, our family, everything." Then he stormed inside, leaving her standing on the porch in tears. That was the moment I knew our family wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. Because betrayal doesn't stop with two people. It spreads, infects, destroys everything in its path. And Laura's toxic love affair had finally been exposed. After that night on the porch, our house was never the same. Evan barely spoke to his mother. When he did, his words came out sharp, filled with a disgust no son should ever have toward the woman who raised him. I could see it in his eyes. The respect was gone, replaced by something like hatred. And the worst part, Laura knew it, but she didn't fight for it. She tried weak apologies, soft voices, gentle touches on his shoulder, but Evan recoiled every time. The betrayal had reached him, and once betrayal touches your children, there's no undoing it. As for me, I existed in a strange limbo. Some nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, imagining different paths my life could take. One where I forgave her, swallowed the humiliation, and rebuilt. Another where I filed for divorce, kicked her out, and started over. And then darker paths, ones filled with revenge, with humiliation to match humiliation. Because betrayal isn't just a wound, it's a question. What are you going to do about it? And every day I felt the answers shifting inside me. The community began to sense something was wrong. At church, Laura and I no longer held hands during prayer. At the grocery store, I avoided small talk with neighbors. One afternoon, a friend from work pulled me aside. "You okay, John? You don't look yourself lately." I forced a smile. "Just stress." But I could see the doubt in his eyes. People knew. Maybe they didn't know the details, but they could smell it. The rot of a marriage falling apart. And in small towns, whispers grow fast. Evan came to me one night, his voice low and urgent. "Dad, we have to do something. She can't just get away with this." I looked at him, at the anger burning in his face. He was young, raw, desperate for justice. But I'd lived long enough to know revenge doesn't come clean. It stains you. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Expose her. Tell everyone. Make her feel the same humiliation she gave us." His words lodged in my chest, because a part of me wanted that, desperately. But another part wondered if revenge would just burn us all to ashes. Laura, meanwhile, seemed to drift between denial and defiance. Some days she acted like nothing had changed, cooking dinner, asking about my day, humming as she folded laundry. Other days she snapped at us, accusing me of turning Evan against her, insisting that I was blowing things out of proportion. But when I looked at her, all I saw was betrayal. One evening I sat at the kitchen table alone, staring at Don's envelope of photos. Proof undeniable. My finger traced the edge of one picture. Laura kissing that boy outside the motel. My jaw tightened. I imagined pinning the photo on the church bulletin board, mailing it to her parents, blowing it up on a projector during the next community potluck, letting everyone see what she really was. The thought gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. But then I thought of Evan. How would it feel for him knowing his friends, his neighbors, his entire world now knew his mother's shame? Would revenge heal him, or would it scar him worse? I poured a whiskey and sat in silence, the amber liquid burning down my throat. Revenge or forgiveness? Fire or surrender? I didn't know which path to choose. That night, Laura finally broke the silence. She sat across from me, her hands clasped, her eyes red from crying. "John," she whispered, "please, we can fix this." I let out a bitter laugh. "Fix this? You've been sneaking around with someone younger than our son. Do you have any idea what that did to me? To Evan?" Tears streamed down her face. I was lost. I needed to feel young again, to feel wanted. Her words twisted the knife deeper. "So you destroyed your family for a fling, for some cheap thrill?" "I still love you," she said desperately. "I made a mistake, but I love you." Her love felt like poison now, toxic, dangerous. I looked her in the eye and said the words I'd been afraid to speak. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you." The morning after Laura begged for forgiveness, I woke to the smell of coffee and pancakes. For years that used to mean comfort, love, family. But now it felt staged, like she was trying to butter me up, to slap a patch over a hole big enough to swallow us whole. Evan walked into the kitchen, took one look at the spread, and scoffed. "What is this, Mom? The sorry I slept with a kid younger than my son breakfast special?" The air went ice cold. Laura's eyes filled with tears, but Evan didn't back down. "Don't," he snapped. "Don't act like you can flip a pancake and erase what you did." I put a hand on his shoulder, but I didn't correct him. Because he was right. A few days later, Laura's parents came to visit. She must have called them, hoping for allies. Her mother, a sharp-tongued woman with silver hair, pulled me aside in the living room. "John, she made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But she's still your wife. Don't throw away 23 years over a fling." I stared at her in disbelief. "A mistake? She's been sneaking into motels with a boy half her age for months. That's not a mistake. That's a choice, over and over again." Her father, quieter but firm, added, "Marriage means forgiveness. You're a man of faith, aren't you? The Bible says—" I cut him off. "Don't you dare quote scripture to me right now. She broke her vows. She betrayed her family. Don't stand here and tell me to forgive her like she forgot to take out the trash." The room fell silent. Laura's parents exchanged glances but said no more. Evan, who had overheard everything from the stairs, muttered, "Unbelievable," before storming back to his room. That weekend, whispers started spreading in the community. Small-town gossip is like wildfire. Someone saw Laura's car parked at the motel. Someone else spotted her laughing with the boy at the diner. Pretty soon, the story had grown legs of its own. At church, people avoided eye contact. A woman from the choir gave me a pitying smile, while a man I barely knew clapped me on the back and muttered, "Hang in there, buddy." Laura felt the shift, too. Her once confident stride turned hesitant. Her once bright smile dimmed. She could feel the judgment, the betrayal's shadow following her everywhere, and part of me relished it. Revenge became a fantasy I replayed daily, printing the motel receipts and leaving them in every mailbox on our street, blowing up the photos onto posters and plastering them around town, inviting everyone we knew to a family dinner and then projecting the evidence onto the living room wall. The more I imagined it, the more satisfying it seemed. But then I'd see Evan, his hunched shoulders, his clenched jaw, his simmering anger. And I'd wonder, would revenge free him or break him even further? Because revenge might destroy Laura. But forgiveness? Forgiveness felt impossible. One night, Evan came to me again. His voice was lower this time, not fiery, but heavy. "Dad, are we gonna divorce her?" The word hung in the air like a death sentence. "I don't know yet," I admitted. He nodded, staring at the floor. "Whatever happens, I'm with you, not her. She lost me." The finality in his voice was like a door slamming shut. Laura hadn't just lost her husband. She'd lost her son too. Laura tried one last time. She cornered me in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. "John, please. We can rebuild. We can go to counseling. We can start fresh." I looked at her, my chest tight with years of love and months of betrayal colliding. "You didn't just cheat, Laura. You humiliated me. You humiliated our son. You took everything we built and traded it for someone who could have been your child. Do you understand that?" She sobbed, nodding. I know. I'll do anything." But the truth was clear. Nothing she could do would erase it. The betrayal was branded into the very core of our family. That night I sat in my study, staring at divorce papers I'd printed but not signed. On the desk beside them lay the manila envelope of photos. Proof of her betrayal. Proof of my humiliation. Revenge or forgiveness. Fire or mercy. I didn't have the answer yet. But I knew one thing. Whatever choice I made next would define the rest of my life. The day the truth finally broke open wasn't planned. I'd spent weeks debating how to end it. Revenge or a quiet separation, exposure or silence. I'd gone back and forth until I felt like I was living in purgatory. But betrayal doesn't wait for your schedule. It explodes when it wants. It was a Sunday morning. Church service. The sanctuary was full, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. Families filled the pews, hymns rose into the air, and I sat stiffly beside Laura, who was pretending everything was normal. Evan sat on my other side, arms crossed, jaw set like stone. Halfway through the sermon, I couldn't take it anymore. The preacher was talking about honesty, about the sanctity of marriage, about trust between husband and wife, and something inside me snapped. I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying through the sanctuary. Heads turned. The preacher froze. Laura's eyes went wide. "I can't sit here and pretend anymore," I continued, my chest pounding. "My wife has been cheating on me for months with someone younger than our son." Gasps echoed through the room. Laura let out a strangled cry, her hand shooting out to grab my arm. "John, stop!" But I shook her off. "You all think we're the perfect family," I said, my voice breaking. "But it's a lie. She destroyed it. She destroyed us." The room was dead silent, the kind of silence that presses against your skin. Then whispers began, rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Laura's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. Evan sat motionless, his eyes locked forward, refusing to even glance at her. And in that moment, the perfect family illusion shattered in front of everyone. The fallout was immediate. Word spread faster than lightning. By that evening, everyone in town knew. Neighbors avoided our house or else lingered just a little too long at the mailbox, hoping to catch a glimpse of the broken family inside. Laura's phone lit up nonstop, calls from friends, texts from family, messages she ignored. Her parents called me, furious. "How could you humiliate her like that?" her mother shrieked through the line. "How could she humiliate me like this?" I shot back. "She made her choices. I just showed the truth." And then I hung up. Evan didn't come home that night. He stayed at a friend's place. When he finally returned the next day, he told me he couldn't stand to be under the same roof as his mother. "I'm done, Dad," he said simply. "With her, forever." I nodded, though it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. A son should never have to disown his mother, but Laura had forced his hand. As for Laura, she withdrew into herself. She stayed in the bedroom, curtains drawn, crying silently. She tried once or twice to approach Evan, but he turned his back every time. She tried again with me, begging for forgiveness, but I had nothing left to give. The trust was gone. The love was gone. All that remained was ash. The boy, her affair partner, vanished. Whether out of fear, shame, or sheer immaturity, he stopped answering her calls. She'd thrown away her marriage, her family, her reputation. For someone who didn't even stick around once the secret came out. That, in some twisted way, felt like justice. 1 week later, I filed for divorce. I didn't tell her until the papers were ready. When I handed them over, she broke down, sobbing. "John, please, don't do this. We can fix it. I'll change. I'll do anything." I shook my head. "It's too late." Her hands trembled as she flipped through the papers. She stopped on the line about custody. Even though Evan was legally an adult, it was still written there, stark and cold. "You're taking everything from me," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "You took it from yourself." That night, Evan and I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees. He turned to me, his expression softer than it had been in weeks. "I'm proud of you, Dad," he said. The words nearly undid me. For so long, I'd felt like a failure, as a husband, as a father, as a man. But hearing that from my son reminded me that maybe I hadn't lost everything. I lost my wife, but I still had him. And that was enough to keep going. The weeks after the divorce papers were served felt like living in a ghost town. Laura stayed in the house for a while, moving through the rooms like a shadow. She spoke less and less, until her voice was just another sound I no longer recognized. I had once thought I knew every inflection, every sigh, every laugh. Now, every sound she made grated against me like nails on glass. Evan avoided her altogether. He came home from campus on weekends, but his time was spent with me, grilling in the backyard, fixing things around the house, sitting in silence that somehow felt more honest than any words. When he passed Laura in the hall, he didn't even look at her. It was as if she had already ceased to exist in his world. And maybe she had. The community didn't let her forget either. Small towns are merciless. At church, she stopped showing up after that disastrous Sunday. At the grocery store, whispers followed her down every aisle. People she'd once called friends crossed to the other side when they saw her. One afternoon, I saw her in the driveway, clutching her phone to her chest, sobbing. She had been trying to call him, the boy, but he was gone. Ghosted her, left her with nothing but silence. The cruel irony of it all? She'd gambled everything for someone who never planned to stay. The divorce finalized faster than I expected. She didn't fight much. Maybe she was too ashamed. Maybe she knew she had no ground to stand on. The house was mine. Evan was mine in every way that mattered, and she was left to start over somewhere else. On her last day in the house, she packed her bags quietly. She stood in the living room, looking around like she was memorizing it. Then she turned to me. "I'm sorry, John," she whispered, "for everything." I looked at her, searching for even a flicker of the woman I married, but all I saw was betrayal. All I saw was the woman who traded a lifetime for a fling. "I believe you're sorry," I said finally, "but sorry doesn't fix what you broke." She lowered her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then she walked out the door, closing it softly behind her. And just like that, 23 years ended. Life didn't magically heal after she left. I still woke up some nights, heart pounding, dreaming of the diner, the motel, the way she smiled at him. I still replayed our wedding day in my mind, wondering how we got from there to here. Betrayal has a way of haunting you, like a ghost that lingers no matter how many times you tell it to leave. But slowly, things began to shift. Evan and I grew closer. We started a ritual, Saturday morning runs, followed by greasy diner breakfasts. He told me things he'd never shared before, how he looked up to me more than I knew, how he never wanted to end up like his mother. His loyalty, his presence, became the anchor that kept me steady. And in time, I found myself smiling again. Not the big, wide smiles of a man blind to betrayal, but the small, genuine ones of someone who survived it. Sometimes people asked me if I regretted exposing her at church, if I wished I'd handled it more quietly. And maybe a part of me did, but another part knew the truth had to come out. Secrets, rot in the dark, and hers had festered long enough. Laura reached out once, months later. A letter in the mail, written in shaky handwriting. She said she was living in a small apartment in another town. She said she missed Evan. She said she wished she could turn back time. I read it once, then put it in a drawer. Not to forgive, not to reconcile, just to remind myself of the cost of betrayal. And here's the cruelest truth of all. She didn't just cheat on me. She didn't just betray me. She betrayed our family, our son, our history. She chose someone younger than our own child, and in doing so, she burned down everything we had built. And though I survived it, though I came out the other side stronger in some ways, the scar will never fully fade. Because betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it rewrites your story. And mine will forever have this chapter I never asked for, branded into it like fire on flesh.